could have done this?
It is a rather pleasant July evening, and I am going to be on my way to catch a screening of Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire. Welcome to Initial Reactions, where I give my preconceptions about a movie, and then my very first thoughts about said movie as I'm leaving the theater. You know, it's kind of funny, but also kind of sad that of the two cinematic universes that Warner Brothers launched in the early mid-2010s, one of them is having a much better 10th anniversary. The MonsterVerse is an interesting franchise in the current entertainment landscape. It's not universally beloved or loathed, but it does have its fans, and people do turn out for them. Every entry makes hundreds of millions of dollars, so they must be doing something right. But I think that strength comes from the fact that, despite it being going on for a decade, we're only on movie number 5. Usually, when a franchise that's branded as a cinematic universe reaches its 10th year, there's so many movies and TV shows and shorts that it becomes practically impossible to keep up. Yet the only piece of extra theatrical media that the MonsterVerse has given us has been Monarch: Legacy of Monsters. There's also comic books too, but you don't necessarily need to watch or read those to be caught up on what's going on. If I could compare it to another franchise, I would say the MonsterVerse is like the early Fast and Furious movies. Characters come and go, and it sometimes gets a bit non-linear, but ultimately it is part of one straightforward story. You do see the potential for spin-offs, but it feels less like a cinematic universe and more just a series of movies. The director for Godzilla vs. Kong is back for this one, and I think he's a pretty solid choice. The fight scenes in the last movie were definitely a highlight, so I'm definitely looking forward to see what he brings us this time around. I think my only major concern is, how are they going to keep this going? Because apparently they've already greenlit a third movie. Now, having Godzilla and Kong on the same screen together is cool, but after a while, the novelty kind of wears off. I think if they really want to keep this franchise going, they'll have to start making spin-offs off different monsters, which I think could work if they did what they did with Kong Skull Island, where they had it set in different time periods, in different places. There's also a very fine line between using a franchise to its full potential and milking it. Let's go see a giant ape and a giant lizard team up to defeat a giant monkey.
Welcome to my world.
Oh, my car's the only one in the parking lot right now. Alright, well, yeah, that was another Godzilla King Kong movie, I guess. First off, some positives. Everything good about Godzilla vs. Kong can be found here, again. Plenty of wide shots of the monsters, no close-ups or quick jump cuts of the fights. It also fixes a problem I had with the last movie, where it feels like it jumps between too many side plots with different human characters. This time around, we only focus on one group of human characters, and we follow them throughout their journey. And, as has become the norm with this franchise, there are a lot, and I mean a lot of moments that make you go, oh, that's awesome. Something that I appreciated from this movie was there was a side plot involving Kong and the little ape that you probably saw in the trailer. And it's a great example of how CGI creations can emote and tell a story with not a single word of dialogue. However, that does bring me to my first real gripe with the movie. It's not so much a Godzilla and King Kong movie as it is a King Kong movie with the occasional scenes with Godzilla. I get that it might be a cultural thing. King Kong is American, Godzilla's Japanese, so they probably were allowed to get away with more by using King Kong. But speaking as someone who was on Team Godzilla in the last movie, I feel kind of cheated. I know this is a bit weird to say this about a movie franchise about giant monsters fighting each other, but after 10 years and 5 movies, Godzilla still feels a bit like an underdeveloped character. If I could use a comparative example, he feels like Thor in the first 2 phases of the MCU. A character that we know can be great, but for some reason they just haven't figured him out yet. It certainly doesn't help that even the 2014 Godzilla movie wasn't strictly a Godzilla movie, but rather a Godzilla fights this monster movie. Maybe this is their way of telling us to go check out the Toho film Godzilla movies instead, but still, was 1998 Godzilla so bad that it scared them from ever doing a proper Godzilla movie ever again? Regardless, it's full of mass destruction and giant animals fighting each other. So if that's how you're hoping to spend a couple of hours, then this is a recommend.